Most people know by now that Azir is a very difficult champion for Riot to balance. One little number too high and he dominates pro play, one too low and he's incredibly weak. This sort of volatility isn't unique to Azir, and we've seen it in other champions like Aphelios, Akali and Kalista. Anyone who has a bit too much potential to outplay the opponent in solo queue and too many things on their kit that make them disproportionately stronger in coordinated 5v5 play. Azir did get a small buff before patch 12.10, increasing his max HP growth over the course of the game, and that propelled his win rate from roughly 47.5% into a gorgeous 49%. Now that sustained DPS and scaling for teamfights is the meta, he's holding up a cushy 50% win rate. And it's not just the one-tricks playing him in the early patch and propping him up either. Has Riot finally found a middle ground for him? Considering that there were no direct nerfs to his performance just yet, that is probably what the Riot balance team wants to be true. But it still has to be seen how the pros adapt to the patch and utilize him in competitive play. Because as history has shown us, Azir being good in solo queue meant that he would be overpowered in competitive. That may hold water today, just as it did 2-3 years ago. One small measure that Riot has taken as a blanket nerf to all DPS mages is reducing the base damage on Liandry's burn, which is currently Azir's best mythic. But I don't think this will have much of an impact, considering it's still the only real DPS mythic for most mages, and even then, it doesn't affect Azir's viability with other mythics. Sure, the Luden's Burst build with Shadow Flame won't one-shot people as easily, but the sustained damage you get from it isn't anything to laugh at. That's because not only does it give you lots of flat magic penetration, which is super valuable against anyone who isn't a dedicated tank, but the cooldown on its burst passive gets reduced with soldier autos, multiplied by the amount of targets you hit with each single attack. You can proc it multiple times in a fight. This means that investing into sustained damage runes and items like Nash's Tooth or Berserker Greaves with Ludens isn't such a bad idea a lot of the time. We also have to consider the fact that Azir, regardless of dealing a bit less or a bit more damage, is still a team-fighting monster. Sure, your teammates aren't going to give you amazing peel or frontline, but you're still a long-range auto-attacker with unavoidable, sustained AoE magic damage, mobility, and decent self-peel. So he's one of the champions that benefit the most out of the durability patch, and from the meta being pushed more towards late-game teamfights and sieges. Personally, I think Azir will be over the curve in this new environment. Think about it. Once the obvious outliers get the nerf hammer, which they will in due time, who will be left? If scaling is still the most effective strategy in the mid lane, and we get rid of Kayle, Swain, Taliyah, and Anivia, who's left? Veigar and Vel'Koz can be tough for Azir to contend with, but you could just ban Veigar, given that he does counter you, and Vel'Koz is always a skill matchup, due to his kit being literally all skill shots. Then, all you have left to truly worry about is Corki, who can bully in the early game and snowball a lead before he can do anything significant. And truth be told, he's not doing too hot nowadays. But of course, maybe it's not all sunshine and rainbows for the Sand Pigeon. Riot will surely notice that his solo queue performance is a bit overtuned, and eventually give him a few bonks to keep him from dominating pro play once again. My bet? They're probably going to revert the HP growth buff he got, and make him contend with the durability changes that everyone received. Will it be enough to prevent Faker and BDD from making good use of him? Probably not. But as long as it's only the monsters amongst the monsters who can make use of Azir's full potential, I'm convinced that this right here is the single best time ever to be an Azir main. There was this one video from roughly a year ago that stated maining Azir is like living in a house of cards. One small nerf and he could crumble any second now. But that was back at the start of Season 11, when our bird was coming out of a wave of big and small nerfs. Nowadays, he has mostly stabilized, getting a tiny buff here, a tiny nerf there, but nothing truly game-changing. It's this stability that makes this champion such an amazing champion to main, or at least to have in your pool. Very few, if any, true counterpicks below the balance team's radar, and very aligned with the new meta introduced in patch 12.10. On top of all that, his win rate is still way above what you'd expect from a champion who is balanced like Akali, who should be at a roughly 48% win rate to be truly balanced. So yeah, if you want to play Azir, if you want to be an Azir main, the time is now. But if you want a more broad view on League's current state, this video will walk you through the 12.10 changes and give a few early insights on what territory we're setting foot in. Hope to see you there and thank you for watching. Cheers!